Welcome everybody. If you're gonna be joining us, I have everybody on mute. If you have any questions, just go ahead and type in the chat box. Yeah, no, Eliza, you're right. The class was today. It's just that it looks like nobody else is joining us, which is kind of surprising, but that's all right. Oh, Eliza, let me actually here. Let me go ahead here. I'm gonna stop the recording here for a second. Oh, you know what, Eliza, you're probably correct, actually. That may have been a mistake on my part. That's okay though. We'll go ahead here, and what I'll do is I'm gonna go ahead here. We'll keep the recording here. Let me actually give me 1 second here. What I'm gonna do here is welcome everybody to the week 3 go-to session. I apologize if it said that it was tomorrow's date. That was an error, but that's okay because we'll post this on the archive so you can check it out afterwards. And of course, and always, as always, if you miss any of these, then you can always go back and look at the archives for any of our previous months. Um, that's an error actually, and I guess that's my fault because I would do it tomorrow, but I actually can't because I have class of my own. So it may have said the 16th, but that's all right because I'm gonna go ahead here and we'll go ahead and we'll do it as usual. And this is recording, so everybody will be able to pick it up later, no problems. And that'll be available as soon as we're done here. Anyways, for this week, just a couple of reminders. The blog postings are due. Actually, they're due at the end of this week. And remember, for this class, we actually have 2 blog postings, not 1. So I know that some of your other classes you have just 1, but for this class you have 2. Just make sure that they're 300 words minimum, spelling and grammar. If you do have citations, then make sure to um, cite them, obviously. And when we say cite them too, you can also, you don't necessarily have to do the at the end of the work cited. You can actually kind of link them in, and that's totally fine, and that's no problem. And so make sure that you do the blog postings. And so for this week, what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears, and um, we are going to, and actually, you know what, Eliza, I'm just thinking about this. It did say Tuesday, but it may have been set up for Wednesday, but that's all right. It doesn't matter because, like I said, this will be available for everybody immediately after tonight. And this week is pretty cool, actually, because starting with this week for Project 3, first of all, you don't have any major projects due this week, other than the discussion, of course, which is basically to look at some print-on-demand companies. We give you a list there, but you're welcome to go ahead and find some other ones and talk about those, and that's fine. And also, so the Project 3 for this week, there is no project due at the end of this week. It's actually, you have until the end of next week, and actually, it's actually extended longer, right? Because of spring break next week. So you actually have a lot of time to do this. That's pretty cool. Just make sure to do the blog postings though, and also for you online students, make sure to do the discussions, right? Because those are obviously due. And for this week, though, for Project 3, what we do is we kind of switch gears, right? So Projects 1 and 2 were about finding an agent and pitching your idea to that agent. Pitching your idea, doing a film treatment, doing a press kit, doing a game treatment, or doing a book proposal, or a TV treatment, or something like that, right? Well, here, we're going to switch gears and we're going to kind of do things the new way. So what you did for projects 1 and 2 is the old way of doing things, which by the way is still a good option. I mean, a lot of people still try to do the old way first. They still try to find an agent and do it the traditional way, and that's fine. A lot of people do that first. But a lot of times you might want to skip that, or sometimes you try to do it the old traditional way and you just don't have any luck doing it, right? So as a result of that, you have this new option now. This is it's and by the way, this is kind of a what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what Kim did for her project 3 basically. And this thing that we call self-publishing was not really available about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? We did not have that option. The reason for that is that in the old days, they used to have what was called vanity presses. So a lot of times you would look at, like, publishing magazines, and you'd see these ads and they'd say, "Hey, you want to get your book published or you want to get your CD made? We'll do it for you." And so what they would do, though, they would have minimum order requirements. So instead of ordering, like, okay, can I get orders as customers make the orders? Can I make orders with you as soon as the customers make them? And they said no, because the technology is not there. So if you wanted to go through them, you would have to buy like 1,000 copies of your book. And then it gets even worse, because then you would take your book or your CD to like Best Buy, for example, and you'd say, okay, I have 1,000 copies of my CD or my book or my DVD. Can I get it on your shelves? And they'd say no, because you don't have a barcode, you don't have an ISBN number, which is required, and so you would basically be out of options. And it's kind of funny, because those of you that are in the film industry, you might know this, but a lot of times what would happen in the old days is that a band would get really excited. They said, "Oh, we can get our CD out there," right? So they'd have this like minimum order requirements, and they would get like 1,000 copies of their CDs. And of course, as you know, a lot of times in the music industry, bands don't last that long, right? So a lot of times what would happen is that they would, first of all, they wouldn't be able to get their stuff in stores because they didn't have barcodes or anything like that, but they would still take their CDs around to their various shows and their concerts and gigs, and they would be able to sell a certain amount of copies that way. But what would happen is after 6 months, the band would break up. So in other words, what would happen is one person would be stuck with, let's say, 800 copies of a CD for a band that doesn't exist anymore. And so it was, this idea of self-publishing had a really kind of pejorative reputation. A lot of people did not really trust the vanity press. But the cool thing is that with technology, the way that things have developed in the last, let's say, 5 or 7 years, you do have this new, what we call print on demand technology. And that's kind of what the discussion for you online students, that's what that is about, right? Is print on demand, which means that as soon as a customer makes an order, the company that you go through will be able to basically put that CD together or that book together or that DVD together and make the appropriate sales that way. So in other words, you didn't have to have a minimum requirement of 1,000 copies or something like that, right? So this is pretty cool. And so what we're going to look at this week is how Kim basically did what you guys are doing for Project 3. So basically, a long story short, Kim has some books published with a publisher named McGraw-Hill. Some of you probably heard of McGraw-Hill. They make a lot of textbooks. And so she has a book that she published the traditional way. And she had this idea for a new book, sort of a nonfiction, sort of legal history book. And I'll explain what it's about in a second here. But basically, she decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to try this self-publishing model to see if it works. And so she did it. She tried it, and guess what? It did work. So let's go through this, what she did, step by step. So one of the things you need to establish right off the bat, and you don't really need Project 3 for this to know this, but I mean, even Projects 1 and 2, you have to know that to be successful, a niche market works best. What is a niche market? Basically, kind of a specialized market, right? In other words, instead of saying like, you know, like I'm going to sell a book or I'm going to make a movie that's in the horror genre. Well, guess what? There's different sub-genres of the horror genre. You have to be more specific than that, right? If you want to, if you're doing some type of nonfiction book about about anything, sometimes it helps to narrow that down to maybe like a time period, for example, or maybe a geographic location or something like that. So that's what a niche market is. And of course, most of you are well aware of that, especially if you guys had, the finance class, the branding class, and other classes like that, right? Um, the second bullet point, though, is that you need to be well known or credible. But this term, I just want to, like, I know that sounds scary at first, like you have to be well known. But keep in mind, I mean, we looked at your project twos, and a lot of you are already very well known. And when we say well known, it doesn't mean like you have to be like Lady Gaga or something like that. But I mean, like, if you have a Facebook page and you have a fan page and you have lots of followers on Twitter or something like that, and you have lots of fans on Facebook, that's considered credible. I mean, you could say that you're credible, you have experience, now that you could say that you're master students and things like that. But the third bullet point, though, is very important. If you want to sell, right? The topic should be popular, right? You don't want to make something that nobody's going to be interested in buying, right? So just keep that in mind, right? So that's what Kim had to do before even starting this project. Now, um, not to scare anybody, but basically what Kim's book is about is about a woman who's considered in the Guinness Book of World Records the worst serial killer of all time. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, or in Hungarian, Erzsébet Bathory. There's been lots of movies about her. Those of you that are interested in video games, there was a movie a few years ago called Staying Alive. That was where they went inside this video game. And anyways, the person that they face is Countess Elizabeth Bathory. She's also, by the way, if you are familiar with the French actress Julie Delpy, she directed a movie a couple years ago called The Countess, which is about her. There's Countess Elizabeth Bathory is in the Hostel movie, Hostel Part Two. There's a woman that at the end that bathes herself in blood. Remember, that's based on Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Her name's Bathory in the film. Um, Snow White, the evil stepmother, is based on her. And Alyssa says, okay, with social media nowadays, it's easier to become well known. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll actually talk about that more so next week, I believe, in terms of marketing. And I guess, by the way, now that I think about it, we probably won't have a go-to session next week because it's spring break. But when we pick this up, in a couple weeks, we'll talk more about the marketing aspect. But yeah, you're absolutely right with social media, and I'll explain actually how Kim did it with social media because she used Facebook marketing, but there's other ways of doing it as well. And we'll talk about some things that maybe kind of cross the line in terms of ethics, but it's important to be aware of some of these things that businesses do in terms of marketing with social media. So we'll talk more about that later. But um, so, anyways, though, just to give you an idea of some of the legends behind Countess Elizabeth Bathory, she's supposedly killed about 500 or 600 of her servant girls. And this is back in like the 1500s. And the story goes that she was so obsessed with her appearance that she constantly like was looking in the mirror. That's where you get the Snow White, the evil stepmother looking in the mirror all the time, or the evil queen or whoever it was, looking in the mirror all the time and smashing the mirror. And the story goes that that the countess was so obsessed with her appearance that she killed all these people and then bathed in their blood as sort of kind of a youthful remedy or something like that. But that's what all these legends are. So Kim, as a lawyer, what her interest was going back and actually examining the true facts of what happened. Like she said, okay, are these all these legends really true? So she went back and she looked at the court records, going all the way back to the 1500s. She looked at the court records and found some interesting information. And long story short, a lot of the legends were just untrue. A lot of people like to hype those up. They were really untrue. So that's kind of what her book is about. Countess Erzsébet or Elizabeth Bathory, right? So, like I said, she was also the inspiration for the Wicked Queen. There was a lot of like movies in the 1970s. There's a movie called Daughters of Darkness. There's a movie called Countess Dracula, and some others. There's been plenty, right? But anyways, that's what her book is about. So what she did is she did a SWOT analysis, which is important before you launch any kind of business, right? But especially, with self-publishing, you want to make sure that you do a SWOT analysis so you can determine strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Um, Her findings revealed that competing books on the Countess were either outdated, sensational, or fictionalized accounts. In other words, what you want to do here for project three, and also I guess project two, is you want to figure out where you can fit in. In other words, there's lots of competition out there. What makes your product or your project unique, right? And So now, okay, now here's the thing. This is not an endorsement for a certain print-on-demand company. This is just explaining the one that she used. She actually used CreateSpace, which is owned by Amazon, right? But there's plenty of other ones out there that you can use. There's no right or wrong answer. And we'll go through project 3 and what you need to do for that. And I'll show you some student examples here too. But basically, she used CreateSpace, which is owned by Amazon.com. Those of you on the music side, it seems like the most popular one is TuneCore, but CD Baby is another popular one. Those of you on the film side, a popular one seems to be a company called Distribber, not distributor, but Distribber. It's a weird spelling. But there's also Film Baby. CreateSpace, by the way, will do both. They'll do music, books, and films. So they'll do all three of those. But those of you on the game side, right, there's Steam is a popular one. Now, what you want to do, and of course, you guys already had the branding class with Ken, right? What you want to do is you want to establish a certain brand, right? You want to have some type of not just an image, but maybe even a slogan. And this is the image that Kim has. And if you go to her website, it's the same thing. If you look at the cover of her book, it's the same thing. You basically want to have a consistent brand. And as you learned in Ken's class, you don't want to have that brand like shifting all over the place. You want to make it consistent, right? So that's an example of what Kim used for hers. And of course, she set up her website. If you're interested in going to this, by the way, it's called infamouslady.com. And you can look at more about web design. And actually, next month, you guys with Kristen will have digital marketing, and she'll show you a lot about designing a website or creating a website. And I know that most of you, or a lot of you, are very talented already, that you already have experience with HTML or, just web design in general, things like that. But you want to make sure to have a website. And by the way, it's kind of funny. When we started doing this class several years ago, it was very expensive. Well, not very, but I mean, it was expensive to run a website. These days, you can find domain names at like, GoDaddy.com or places like that. And it's like really cheap. It's like $2 a month at some of these places, or sometimes not even that, right? So it can be very cheap, but you basically want to have some type of website. And even if you don't want to have like an official like website, what you can do is, you at least want to have like a Facebook page, or definitely like, Twitter, and some of these other free social media sites that Eliza was talking about, right? Because that's a good way to sort of get even if you're not going to be advertising on there, that's a good way to get exposure. In fact, like one of your discussions last week talked about that. Like you always want to have like some type of web page, and you can link your blogs in with that as well, right? So So if you go to Kim's website, what you'll notice actually is that she's got information, and what you want to do too if you have a website is you want to give your customers something, even for free. You want to kind of get them hooked. So you do want to provide like information about your product first of all, like if it's a book, it's a film, if it is a game, if it's a TV show, whatever it is, you want to get them information. And let's just say hypothetically that you have like a TV show or a film or something like that. You want to provide at least, some type of free clips, trailers, things like that. Give them something for free, because if you don't, they're just going to go on to the next website, right? So you want to get them hooked. And the way that you do that is you offer them stuff. You offer them information about your product. Like in Kim's case, she talks about, like what her book offers that others don't, why you as an author are credible, multiple ways to buy the book. And also, I mean, and on this bullet point right here, you definitely want to make sure that you have a link to Amazon where they can buy your product, right? Or whatever, maybe not Amazon, whatever company is out there to buy your product. Yeah, so Eliza says GoDaddy because they frequently have sales. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because I was actually helping somebody else get their website out there. And when we looked up the different sites out there, yeah, I mean, you can find like really cheap domain names. So GoDaddy is definitely one of them. We're talking like $2 a month or something like that, almost nothing, right? So then what she did is she decided on strategic releases. Now, now, since the nature of her book, about a lesbian vampire or whatever, Halloween would have been an ideal time to get that released. She didn't quite make that because it was going through the final editing stages, but it was close to that, though. It was like early November, but definitely, the holiday season is a great time to launch your product, right? Because that's when people tend to spend the most money around the holidays. So definitely make sure that you get your stuff out there by Christmas at least, or the holidays. Okay, then now the cool thing is a lot. If you find a good print-on-demand company, and that's actually for you online students, that's actually one of your discussion questions this week is to do research. That's one of the points of that discussion post is to do research and find out which ones are good and which ones are not so good. I can tell you that there's some on that list that we provide you that maybe used to be good, but have kind of lost some of their credibility in recent years, and that's fine. But the point that I want to get across, though, for Project 3, there is no right or wrong answer to which print-on-demand company you use. It's just a matter of whether you can explain and justify that. So I'll show you some student examples of Project 3 coming up here, but that's basically what you want to do is be able to explain which print-on-demand company you're going to use and why you're choosing them. Now, with CreateSpace, again, this is not an endorsement, but this is just one example. CreateSpace, since it's owned by Amazon, if you go through them, you get instant worldwide distribution, right? Because they will get your stuff and make it on their available on their website. So it's in most good, I mean, all good print on demand companies will do the same thing. Whether it's TuneCore, whether it's CD Baby. So in other words, on the music side, they'll get your stuff on iTunes, right? And so any good print on demand company will do that for you. Now, again, I don't want to like disparage any of the print on demand companies, but there's one company called Blurb, which seems pretty good at first, and it might be different now. It might be different now, but I know that a while ago, what they would do is you could self-publish with them, but they really wouldn't get your stuff out there. In other words, if people wanted to buy your book, they actually had to buy it through blurb.com, which is really not what you want. You want to try to get as many channels for distribution as possible, right? So a good print on demand company will do that. And by the way, like in CreateSpace's case, what they will do is not only will they get your stuff on Amazon, but they also have what they call extended distribution. So if people want to buy it on Barnes and Noble, they can as well. Now you don't, in that example, you don't technically make as much in terms of royalties that way, but still though, it's another way that people can get your product. So a good print on demand company will do that for you. Okay. So then what she did, like I said, expanded distribution. And here's the cool thing. Remember at the beginning of this, I told you that back in the day, about 5 years ago, if you wanted to go through what they call a vanity press, they wouldn't be able to give you a barcode or a ISBN number or this EAN 13, by the way, it's the same thing as the ISBN, only it's another 3 numbers. So the ISBN is 10 numbers, the EAN is 13 numbers. It's the same exact number, except the EAN adds 13. That's just the European version, basically. But anyways, though, a good print-on-demand company will give you this stuff for free. Whereas before, if you were going through a vanity press, not only would you have to have a minimum order, let's say 1,000 copies of your CD, but you would also then have to get the CDs barcodes and ISBN numbers. Well, guess what? A print-on-demand company, not only will they don't require minimum order requirements, but they also give you the barcode and the ISBN and the EAN 13 number for free, right? So it's what we're saying is that this is a really good option here. Um, and then, what Kim did too is, what you want to do is you want to obviously make this announcement to everyone right? Just let them know, hey, I got this new product out there. Would you be interested in buying it? And, your friends and so forth. Then, okay, and Eliza, I guess we'll probably pick this up next time when we do the next go-to session, but you're right about social media. And what Kim did in her case is she did a Facebook ad, and I'll explain how that works. But long story short, I'll explain that a lot of people think that going through Facebook, you think, well, that's a huge company, right? The biggest company in the world. If you want to advertise on there, no way, right? Because it's going to cost you a fortune. Well, not true, because you can actually have it set up what they call targeted advertisements. So only people that are interested in your product will see your ad, first of all. And then secondly, you can set your price to the point where if you only have a certain budget, let's just say $50 a month, and let's just say that comes out to, like, I don't know, $1.50 a day. Or let's just make it easy. Let's just say that you have a budget for $60 a month and $2 a day, and you don't want to go beyond that. Like, that's your budget, right? Well, you can have it set up so that as soon as people click on that enough times, the ad will shut off. So you don't have to worry about a million clicks and then them charging you a lot of money. You can actually have it set up so it's convenient for your budget, which is really good, right? Then there's also things you can do with, like, merchandise. Like, some of you are familiar with, like, cafepress.com. Like, if you want to sell mugs, t-shirts, those types of things, right? So now the question is, where do you take your project, right? And that's what you have to do for project 3. Now, before I show you some student examples here, let me go ahead and, well, I'll tell you what, let's do the student examples first. So let's look at project 3 first of all. Let me minimize this. Okay, actually, okay, so here's project 3. Here's the assignment instructions, right? Let me blow this up a tad. So first of all, I want you to be aware that we do have in the references this thing called business strategy template. Now, keep in mind that the project 3 that you're doing is very similar to a business plan, basically. But there are some key differences that I want to highlight here. The first thing is, in fact, you know what? I apologize. I should have loaded this beforehand. Let me go ahead here and let's look at this business strategy template here. So just give me 1 second here. Actually, you know what? It's in our assignment. Okay, so actually you guys have this already, but let's just take a look here, because this goes through the instructions in a little bit more detail. And there's some key things, and this is why these go-to sessions are so important. There's some key things that I want to give you to give you some advice to do the best you can on this. So first of all, number 1, where a lot of people get confused with, is this one right here. The mission statement is not the mission for your business, okay? And a lot of people get confused by that. Now, it's true that in your business plan that you're going to do for your final project here in EBMS, your mission statement will be for your business, right? And also, this is just a reminder, remember that the projects that you do for this class do not have to relate to your final business plan. So I don't think there was any problems with that for this week. I think, sometimes we get some students who can still confuse that. They think that, like, they have to do the projects based around their business, which is not the case, right? But anyways, though, the mission statement for project 3 is the mission of your project, okay? It's not the mission for the company. So let's just say that you have a book and you want to bring social awareness about some topic, or let's just say, even if it's a fiction book, you can simply say, well, the mission of this book is to try to entertain people, first of all, make money, and also maybe give people new insight about whatever, right? I mean, the fact is that even with fiction books and even with most films, the fact is that most of the time, they're not out there just simply to entertain. Usually there's something of value that you can get across, right? Now, sometimes your mission statements are very, very long and extensive, right? Sometimes you really want to tackle an issue and bring awareness about something, whatever it might be, whether it's music, whether it's a video game for that matter, whether it is a TV show, whether it's a film, whether it's a book, whatever it is. The mission statement relates to the mission of the product, your project, not necessarily the company, okay? The executive summary is about you. explain yourself here, explain your qualifications, credibility, experience, etc. One key point here that, again, this is good news for you, is that you can reuse some of the stuff that you did for Project 2. We don't really have self-plagiarism in this class. In other words, you can because that's kind of how it works in the real world, right? You can reuse for this executive summary some of the stuff that you did last week, for example, in like the author biography or the filmmaker's biography, whatever it is. You can reuse some of that. That's okay for the executive summary. Also, I should mention, for since this is kind of like a business style document, make sure to use the third person, not the first person. So in other words, you would say, for example, if you are, let's just say, if you're Alex, right? You would say, Alex is an accomplished student, accomplished filmmaker. He's done these credits and blah, blah, blah. You know, it sounds weird to talk about yourself in the third person, but that's how you would do it as a business document, right? Okay, the next part is about the company, right? Now, an important thing about this is that you can actually reuse some of the same materials from before, but also, though, for the company description, it's important to note here that if you are just writing a book, you might say, well, I don't have a company. Like, what's the company for that? Well, here, again, this is where you can kind of be hypothetical. You can simply make up a company, okay? You could simply say, you know, for example, Christine Randolph's Publishing or something like that. You know, you can be a little bit hypothetical here. And some of you might have a company for real, though, and that's fine. Some of you, by the way, let's just say that you are doing for our class for Project 3, you're doing, you know, a book project, but let's just say that you have a real company, or even your final company for EBMS. You can talk about your real company here, and you could just simply say that we're releasing this product as part of a new project that we're doing or something like that, like a new publishing part of our company or something like that. That's fine for that. The next part is about the project itself. So whether it is a movie, a book, a film, a music product, whatever it is, you just kind of explain like what it is. Try to be as specific as possible with this one. You know, don't just say I'm writing a book. You know, tell us what the book is about again. Now, this section, the next section, the manufacturing and distribution, is the most important section of Project 3. Okay, this is where you bring in your print-on-demand company and you explain which one you're going to use. And we won't go through all 7 of these questions here, but try to do your best to answer all 7 of them. You don't have to do them in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can do them in paragraph form. That's fine. You can do them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you want. But try to answer as many of these things as you can. Right? So like number 1, which POD site are you going to use? Why did you choose it? That's another good point, is the rationale. Why did you choose this company as opposed to another one, right? Discuss whether you will have hard copies and digital or digital. Most in this day and age, most people will use both, right? Hard copy and digital. And you know what the retail price will be. Oh, that's another thing too, by the way. Number 4, with a good print-on-demand company, they will allow you to set your price. So in the old days of doing things the traditional way, you would be kind of at the mercy of whatever the publisher wanted. So if you wanted to sell your book for $35 and they said, nope, we're going to sell it for $15, you would have to accept that. Here, you actually can choose the price here, which is really, really convenient. And then try to, I mean, obviously this isn't your finance class that you had a long time ago with, you know, so I guess you probably would have had Mike at that point. But you don't have to be that specific, but try to talk about some of the you know, price per unit sold, how much you're going to make per unit sold, I should say. And by the way, I won't go to these sites now, but if you do enough research, they will have charts like on CreateSpace or sites like that. They will actually have charts where they can show you what you set your price for and how much money you're going to make per unit sold, like things like that. And they will go through in detail the financial terms and things like that. Whether the deal will be exclusive or non-exclusive, Another good advantage of print on demand companies is that a lot of times they're non exclusive, meaning that you can go through one company and if you don't like them, they're not doing enough or you're not selling enough through them, guess what? You still have your copyright. You can take it to somebody else. Another disadvantage with the old way, the traditional way, is that you did not get to keep your copyright. So there's been plenty of times where artists have sold their material to agents who then will shop it to publishers. And let's just say hypothetically, it's a book. And guess what? The publisher says, "Oh, we don't like the ending. This doesn't have a happy ending. We're going to change it." Guess what? You had to accept it because once you sign with them, you sign over your copyright. Print on demand, you don't have to worry about that, right? And then what types of licensing, merchandising options exist if that's applicable, right? This section, by the way, is the most important one. And another point about this one, though, about this manufacturing and distribution, guess what? Your manufacturer and your distributor are oftentimes the same exact company. It's the print on demand company. In other words, if you go through TuneCore, they will manufacture your CDs and they will also be responsible for distributing them when customers order them, right? So a lot of times your manufacturer and distributor is the same company. And then go into detail about marketing and promotion. Once again, you can reuse some of the stuff that you did for project 2 in this. Some of the things might be different, but still, talk about the marketing and promotion. Again, as Eliza said, we'll talk more about this Web 2.0 next time, but you probably want to, if you want to start on this, you can definitely talk about this. Talk about the demographic, the target markets, logo, branding, things like that, competitors, things like that, and then just a brief conclusion. It doesn't have to be more than a paragraph, but just a brief conclusion. So those are the instructions for project 3, and now let's get into some examples of this. So okay. So this is an example from this is an example of a music product, and I removed the student's name for I wanted them to be anonymous. But they have the mission statements. Actually, to nitpick this, they should have had for their mission statement. They should have had more information about the product itself, not the company. Again, that's kind of a mistake, right? The mission of now they do talk about the mission of the music, which is okay, but remember, you're not talking about this record company. You're talking about the product, right? And then executive summary, just information about yourself, right? And let me kind of blow this up so you can maybe see it a little bit bigger. Okay. Manufacturing and distribution. Remember, this is the most important part. That's why in this case, this is the longest part. This is actually really, really good, actually. If you look here, they're going to use CD Baby. And you can see here, they're going through the percentages. They're actually comparing CD Baby with TuneCore. And once again, this kind of comes into your research, remember. And by the way, what you see here, this may have changed. They're very often, these print-on-demand companies are, adjusting their prices. So like the CD Baby, this 9%, I'm not sure if that's still true, but again, this is where the research comes in. And so I can't emphasize enough, try to be as specific as possible for this manufacturing and distribution section. So looks like they're gonna try to be selling this for $9.99 per album, which is about standard these days. Um, and they even go into now. This is actually probably a copy and paste from CD Baby, but that's okay though because they cite it, right? That's okay. But you can see here again. This is where the financials. You don't have to provide this level of detail for your financials, but I mean, this is an example of what they did. Marketing and promotion, they go through all these details about social media, Q&A sessions on Google Hangouts. So you get the idea here. Basically, because students will ask us a lot of times, like, well, how long should this be? And the answer is there is no right or wrong answer to that. But in general, to get the best grade, the students that get the best grades tend to be as extensive and as specific as possible with their plans. Right now, you don't even have they have a logo. You don't have to have a logo here. Some of you might, but that's okay. That's not required or anything like that, right? And then just a brief conclusion. Okay, so that's how a student did it on the music side. Let's take a look here at another example here. And another thing, by the way, there is no APA formatting on this one. So you can do it single space, you can do it double spaced, however you want, right? Now this is actually, I believe this is a short film, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but anyways, though, we'll get to this, whether this is a film or not. I think it's a film, but anyways, the point though is that look at the mission statement here. This is what I'm talking about. This is a good one here, because he's talking about the mission of friendship never dies, right? So it's talking about the product, it's not talking about the company, okay? That's what you want to be shooting for the mission statement. And then executive summary, just a brief biography about yourself. Um, okay, and then company description. Now this is where you do talk about the company, not unlike the mission statement, but here, talking about the company description. The product. Okay, so yeah, I was right. Okay, it was a short film. That's what I thought. Okay, so then he just talks about the product here, right? So he's just talking about the plot. And once again, not to sound like a broken record, but it's perfectly okay to reuse some of the stuff that you did for Project 2, right? So I know that, for example, on the film team, you did your whole, well, you didn't actually have to go through a scene by scene, but some of you went through a description of the product, and you went through a whole synopsis of what happens in the film, right? Well, guess what? You can, in some ways, you can copy and paste a lot of what you did there, right? No, I mean, if you did like a lengthy, you don't really have to like copy and paste something that long, you might just want to condense it down to like just a kind of a semi-lengthy paragraph like this. And that's fine, right? Okay, and then once again, the manufacturing and distribution is the most important part of this assignment. So in this case, the student is using CreateSpace, and not only do they explain that they're using CreateSpace, but look right here. You explain why you're choosing CreateSpace. Remember, there's no right or wrong answers to what print-on-demand company you use. Just explain why you chose it, right? So in this one, they're using this print-on-demand company because of the many benefits in terms of pricing and creative freedom. For instance, so you're giving examples here. They have a small fixed price of $4.95, and on 2 distribution channels, Amazon and eStore. And actually, you know what? This is a little bit dated because I think they actually CreateSpace does more now. I think they can actually get your stuff like on iTunes, for example. But anyways, okay, so then the student is going into details, right? Percentages, numbers. Remember, don't go crazy. This doesn't have to be like the finance class that you guys had with Mike, but do the research and find out how much you're going to make, what your royalty rates will be, things like that, right? Marketing and promotion. Now, in this case, the student is going to be doing a movie trailer. By the way, you guys can do stuff on YouTube for free, right? guys can create like with your I forget what they call it, the software that you have. Why am I drawing a blank? But the software where you can actually go on. Well, obviously some of you have Final Cut Pro, but you don't have to have that necessarily. But basically, though, I mean, obviously you have cameras in the in your laptops there, so you can definitely do some type of promotional work. But I know that a lot of you are very talented and have video experience. So does it cost anything to put anything on YouTube? Nope, it does not. So and he's going to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like that, and then just a brief conclusion. Okay, so that's an example of film. Okay, let's take a look here at okay, this is I believe this is a book, if I'm not mistaken. I guess we'll find out as we go along, but here, this is a mission statement again. Once again, remember, the mission is about the product. So in this case, I think it's a book. Yeah, it is. Okay, it's a book. Yeah. So the mission is about the book, right? So this book seeks to educate and enlighten African American caregivers of children about different and real emotions regarding the concept of death. It also seeks to, you get the idea. It's the mission about the book. It's not a mission about the company. Then just a biography. Once again, you can reuse stuff that you used before. The company description. The product here, it's a nonfiction book, and he's including the table of contents. And this is a kind of a unique project. You don't have to do this, but in this case, what the student did is, I think it's a she. What she did is she did a book as well. It was in conjunction with the music project. Remember, that's okay. That's okay if you want to put it together that way. I mean, you don't have to, obviously. You only have to do one. But this student did a book in conjunction with a CD. So in this case, not only do you get the book, but also a 2-disc music compilation. And so she lists the songs here. And then manufacturing and distribution. Now she's using this company called, I guess it's called Exlibris. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Now, now that's okay. You can choose any print-on-demand company that you want, although in this case, I would actually be careful about this part right here. You can do it if you want, and I think she explains it, and that's fine. Okay, that's okay. But just as a kind of an aside, I would just remind you that print-on-demand companies, good ones, do not really charge you that much. Like in Kim's case, I think it costs like $50 to set up an account on CreateSpace, right? It might be more or less now, I'm not sure. But I mean, same thing with TuneCore or CD Baby. You don't really have to spend thousands of dollars. And that's another one of the good things with print on demand is that it's very, very cheap, right? It's affordable. So in this case, she's using it, and I guess that's okay because she's explaining why she's using it. And I guess if you have the money, you can, but I would just caution you about these companies that promise huge things with these huge packages that cost thousands of dollars. But nonetheless, though, okay. Marketing and promotion. She's talking about um, the book targets, a creation of, well, I mean, again, you get the idea. Marketing and promotion, Twitter, Google Hangouts. She's talking about different radio stations that she might be interested in doing interviews with, things like that. And then technically she should have a conclusion here. I guess it says in the instructions that it's optional, but I would just recommend just having a brief conclusion. It doesn't have to be more than like 3 or 4 sentences, basically, but just include a conclusion there. Okay, and then let's look at another example here. This is, okay, this is, oh, this is an, okay, this is a television show example, and actually, this is a really creative project from what I remember. Um, this student, okay, once again, let's look at the mission statement here. Okay, Alex says is a good print-on-demand company for music. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you could choose whichever one you want. There's no right or wrong. Oh, Songcat. Okay, yeah, yeah. So yeah. Oh, Songcast. I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. Again, be creative as you want and be as open as you want with this project, because sometimes people ask, like, what's the right answer, and the answer is, well, no, you tell us. Like, you do the research and you explain. I mean, your goal is to explain to maybe a potential investor to say, hey, give me money and or invest in my company, and this is what I'm going to do. So just be as convincing as possible with this. So let's take a look here at the mission statement for this one. This is a television show. This is a reality show, and this is the reality of property management, and the mission is to entertain and educate the audience on commercial real estate. The show will give an in-depth look into the day-to-day operations of property management companies. In addition, the audience will have a behind-the-scenes look at a multi-million-dollar asset. So really, really creative. We don't often see reality shows necessarily like real estate ones, but pretty interesting though. And then executive summary, just information about himself. Now, this student, from what I remember, he had a background in real estate, so that's why he chose this as his project. But then you have the company description, the product, which is the television show. So it's a reality-based docu-series for television. So you get the idea of the show, manufacturing and distribution. This one is one that I don't really, am not that familiar with. Now, but that's okay as long as you explain the strategy, right? And in this case, I guess they let you keep 100%. And by the way, that's a good point about like tune. Those of you on the music side, TuneCore, I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they give you 100% of your royalties. Now, there's a yearly fee that you have to pay, but other than that, a lot of these print-on-demand companies will allow you to keep a substantial percentage of your revenue. And then he goes into detail about marketing, and then a brief conclusion. Okay. And then, so that's basically it. Now, I apologize. I don't have a game one to show you. Um, I don't have one offhand. I know I could probably look one up, but game would be kind of the same thing where you're basically just doing the same exact template, the same exact formula. Now, your print on demand company might be something different. For games, it's a little bit difficult. Like Steam is a really popular site, but they but I know that sometimes some of your games are not intended to be like PC games. So that's where you have to kind of maybe go out and do the research as to what company you're going to use. But that's again part of the project is doing the research on that. So before I get to the discussion questions for the on-campus students, the attendance questions, I should say, does anybody have any questions about what you need to do for Project 3? Remember, this is going to be due for a while because next week is spring break. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe next week is spring break, so looks like we'll have a little break. So you won't actually, so you'll have a lot of time to work on this. Yeah, Christine. We already covered that. um, yes. So Mike, yeah, this definitely will be archived. So apologize that it was set up wrong, but yes, this will be available tonight. Actually, um, again, sometimes these things go pretty big in size, so it's tough to um, convert them to like a single sort of like file, basically. But it should be able to be broken up, so you should be able to see this like later tonight. Um, so yes, this will be archived. Yeah. So Eliza, yeah, if yeah, you definitely can. The one thing with that though, just as a warning, they don't let us like pre-grade, if that makes any sense. So in other words, you can't take your work to somebody and say like, can you tell me what I need to do to get 100? Can you fix all the errors? No, but definitely if you want us to take a look at what you have and give you kind of a ballpark, idea of how you're doing, then that's no problem. But I think you guys should be fine. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, sure, Eliza, and I think that you guys will be fine. I mean, your project twos were outstanding. So once again, apologize for the wrong date on there. Um, that was just, to be honest, that was just all on me. That was my mistake. But that's okay because this will be archived. So, as always, if you do have any questions, just feel free to send an email. And I guess I probably won't see you guys until the week after the spring break. So have a good break. I don't know if anybody's going anywhere, but but have a good break. And like I said, if you have any questions, just feel free to send us an email. We get back to you almost within 24 hours in almost all cases. So okay, so let's go ahead here and we'll do the attendance questions. Remember, this is just for the on-campus students. Okay, it's not for the online students. Okay, so and these are really easy. You probably don't even need to attend these to to be able to answer them. But how many blog posts will you need to submit? The answer is 2, right? What can you discuss in your posts? Well, the answer is basically anything that's related to the entertainment industry. So it doesn't have to be in your field or your specific field. So if you're music, it could be something in film, doesn't matter. But just as long as it relates to entertainment, and so Mike, yeah. I tell you what, Mike, I'll actually when I close this down, I have to let it save. So I'll tell you what, I'll give you a call right after this, okay? And so what can you do to discuss in your or what do you discuss in your post? Anything related to the entertainment business, right? Number 3, is it acceptable to submit your blogs by links, hard copy, or both? Well, obviously, for you online students, you can't do it by hard copy. For you on-campus students, technically, I guess you could in hard copy, but basically, just the easiest way to do it is just send a link, or just for you online students or on-campus students, just go ahead and just copy and paste your link to your page into a Word document and then just submit that. Or what you can do is you can simply copy and paste your blog and just do it right on Microsoft Word and send it through that way. And number 4, are both posts due at the same time? The answer is yes. So they're both due at the end of this week, right? How long should they be? Again, 300 words each, basically. Number 6, are sources required? The answer is technically no, but realistically, with a little footnote here, realistically for number 6, they probably should be because, or they probably should have some type of outside source because most of the time you're not writing about like, like you went to Wendy's or something like that. That really doesn't count for a blog post. Most of the time, you're going to be commenting on something that happened in the industry, and in most cases, the way that you learn about what happens in the industry is if you read outside sources. So technically, though, number 6 would be no. Number 7, what is the purpose of the business strategy? The answer would be to simply to explain how you will self-publish your work, your project. That's basically it. Just to explain how you will go about self-publishing your project that you've been working on. Number 8, in general, the business strategy has many of the same sections as a what? The answer is a business plan, right? Even though it's not a business plan, it has many of the same sections as a business plan. Number 9, what if any is the page requirement for the business plan? There is none. Okay, there's no requirement. But once again, with the little footnote there, that the students that tend to do best on project 3, or what we call the business plan, are the students that provide the most information and the most detail. So there's technically no requirement, but I mean, you want to provide as much information as possible for that. And then finally, number 10, where can you find a template for the business strategy? Well, simply in our references, and um, also for you, basically for both online and campus, I think it's connected with your assignment. So the answer would be it's connected with the assignment itself, the assignment instructions itself, or in the course references, basically. And actually, on that note, now that I think about it, they're no longer in our references. They're only attached to the assignments. So, but I mean, either answer would be fine. Okay, so once again, I'm going to go ahead here and say goodbye to everybody. Hope everyone has a good break. I want to let this archive here, so that should be up later tonight. What's probably going to happen, I can tell you already what's going to happen, I'm almost positive, is that we won't be able to put this into a file, but what will happen is you'll see like a Word document with like links to the YouTube pages that this will be on. It'll probably be broken up into different parts there. And of course, as always, you can always check out our previous months too, because those will usually work, and really they're the same thing every month basically. We haven't changed it for a while, so okay. So thank you guys all for joining us tonight. We'll go ahead here and we'll close off, and I'll start the recording. And I'll put this up shortly. Thanks.